Can driving a car be ethical? That's the question I wanted to examine today. And because when things become really normalized in society to the point where we don't even think about it, it's easy to not consider any kind of moral implications that it might have. So that's a question I wanted to examine today, because driving cars is one of those things that we don't even think about. It's a common fixture of society, and so we don't ever think critically about it. So I think what it really boils down to is, kind of with anything that we're looking at the ethics of, what are our moral obligations with regards to this activity? And if we fulfill those moral obligations, then that activity is moral. And if we don't, then it is immoral. So I think it's really that simple. So that's what we're going to look at with driving cars. So I'm going to list out the moral obligations you kind of have driving a car here. And starting with the first one, and that is to drive over top of cyclists. And actually, that's the only moral obligation you have driving a car. So let me explain a little bit here. Now, you might think that I'm saying that because of their obnoxious habits of driving slowly right in front of everybody and slowing traffic down, being a pain in the ass and a nuisance, and causing people to hate their lives. That is not what I'm talking about. All right, while that may be sort of a jerk activity, while it may be inconsiderate and narcissistic, at the end of the day, that's just an inconvenience, right? It's just, and I'm a patient man. I don't mind driving behind a slow cyclist. That is not what obliges us to run them over. The issue, and let me take my hat off for a second, because, I genuinely mean this shit. The issue is that 90% of the time I see a cyclist, they are breaking the law. All right, and I live in an area with a lot of cyclists. And so it's when something evil is done and it's out of sight, it's easy to forgive. But I am surrounded by these immoral acts done by cyclists. So I cannot forgive. I cannot put it out of sight. I'm right there on the moral battlegrounds. Now, why is that such a big deal that they are just rampant lawbreakers? And I mean it. I have seen a man bicycling with his children, and he drove straight through a red light at an intersection. Now, some of the times you see cyclists breaking the law, you can kind of give them a pass, all right? Obviously, traffic laws mainly govern cars, and we're not really thinking about the fact that they're cyclists. So when you see them, maybe they're not sticking to lanes the way that you normally would in a car. It's like, okay, they're on a bicycle. Driving right through an intersection at a red light with your children. Depths of depravity, okay? Now, when I was in Japan, I met an old man. Well, I didn't meet him, but I was out on the street and I started to jaywalk. That's a common, we don't even think about that. It's breaking the law, but we don't think about it in America. We just do it all the time. But I started to do that in Japan, and the old man stops me and he says, the small acts, this is what leads to society's downfall. And that's the issue with these here bicyclists, is that they're this sort of public witness, this sort of public example of just constant law breaking. And that's what our youth are watching. That's what our youth are seeing. And it's telling them, oh, well, morals don't really matter. All right, you can just do whatever. Right? And it's an issue of social contract, okay? These cyclists, because you live in a society, there's certain taboos, there's expectations for how you're going to behave. That's the social contract. And these cyclists have torn it up and wiped their butt with it. And they said, I don't care. I'm just gonna, drive past the stop sign, drive through a red light. I'm gonna cut you off. I'm gonna swerve around. I'm gonna do my gay little hand dance, which I appreciate in the sense that they are following the law with it. But it is pretty uncool. That just has to be said. And they don't care about the social contract. And so the inevitable end of that is that they will ultimately, guaranteed, ignore every taboo and every social precept that could exist. Cyclists may be driving through red lights today, and then tomorrow they're going to eat somebody. They're going to become cannibals. They're going to become any kind of unimaginable act of horror, and it's guaranteed that they're going to commit it because they've already breached the social contract. So that's really, if you're in a car, and you see a cyclist, it's a matter of the gas. Aim in properly. That's your obligation when you're inside of a car. Now, I will say, with the way that society kind of is, it's not really acceptable to drive over cyclists. And so that's something we need to take in consideration when looking at this moral obligation. Because acting in the morally righteous manner is going to bring out harm to yourself, is going to cause you, suffering and hardships because you're going to get arrested. And so taking that into consideration, it kind of shifts what we're really talking about here. Instead of a moral obligation, it kind of becomes moral heroism. Like it's a superlative rather than the bare minimum. It's not an expectation of you have to do this. It's something that if you are wanting to be heroically righteous, you will go out of your way to do it in spite of the suffering that it will bring you personally. And so I would say that at the end of the day, there aren't really, with that in mind, there aren't really moral obligations for driving a car. And so that's what I can kind of say. You might be thinking I'm making an excuse for why I personally have not driven over any cyclists. But the reality is that that's not an excuse for myself, because I have never said that I am a morally righteous person. And in fact, the reason I don't drive over cyclists is because I am morally bankrupt.